An isolated castle stood on the outskirts of Kushin City. Inside its dark corridors, a group of men advanced cautiously. Nagi walked among them, pressing his companion for reassurance about the intel. The companion reminded him that Count Xias himself had confirmed it, leaving little room for doubt. Still unconvinced, Nagi grew irritated, questioning why no beasts were in sight and if the others had gone blind. His companion explained that word had spread of their arrival. Nagi admitted that if it was true, then it all made sense. The group soon reached the center of the castle, staring around in confusion. They muttered among themselves, wondering what this place was, and noting that it had never appeared on the map. One of them pointed toward an exit where a staircase led upward. Another hesitated, admitting that the path gave him an uneasy feeling, though it still seemed like the best option. Nagi dismissed the idea with annoyance, reminding them that Ilian's squad had already been assigned the upper floor. Turning to one of his men, he ordered him to check it out. The man hesitated nervously, but Nagi's rising anger forced him forward. Reluctantly, the man climbed up, soon reporting back that nothing could be found. But just as he turned, a beast emerged from behind and devoured him instantly. Two more monsters appeared alongside it, roaring furiously as they lunged at the intruders. Panic spread quickly as Nagi and his companions attempted to flee, only to find themselves surrounded on all sides by more beasts. Fear gripped Nagi. He hid behind one of his own men, shoving him forward to face the creatures. One by one, his comrades were slaughtered, until Nagi stood alone. His body trembled uncontrollably, his grip on his sword faltered, and the blade slipped to the ground. As a beast lunged at him, death seemed certain. But before the strike landed, the monster was cut down by a sudden attack from above. Stunned, Nagi looked up and saw Ranson standing with a squad of men. Ranson's confident voice carried across the hall as he offered his hand. Relief washed over Nagi, who admitted that the timing could not have been better. With calm determination, Ranson stepped forward, drawing his sword. He told Nagi to watch carefully, for this was the true height of a sword master. One beast charged, but Ranson drove his blade through its throat, slicing it open in a single motion. Two more beasts rushed him, yet he dispatched them just as effortlessly. Nagi could only stare in shock as Ranson's men cheered him on. When the battle was done, every beast lay dead. Nagi admitted to himself that a sword master truly stood on another level. He muttered that Count Xias would surely grant Ranson a generous reward, adding with false bravado that he could have handled the creatures himself. Ranson cut him down with sharp words, mocking his big mouth and weak blade. If he wanted true strength, he would have to train harder. Nagi burned with anger on the inside, but outwardly forced a casual response, pretending to agree. The scene shifted to Kushin City, at the Ilnian ruins, where Ranson and his men arrived. A man rushed toward him in panic, demanding to know why he was late. Ranson apologized, explaining that things had gotten messy. The man revealed that Count Xias had already been there, and the situation had turned dire. Startled, Ranson asked what had happened. The man handed him a scroll, explaining that Xias had given it to him before taking the children away. Ranson unrolled the scroll, reading its contents. His eyes widened as he realized it carried a single command: kill Delkash and return. Shocked, Ranson muttered that Xias truly wanted them to kill him. It was then explained who Delkash was. Blood Count Delkash, a true blood vampire of terrifying power, and the sword master who ruled Kashu City. Xias controlled Kushin City, while Delkash ruled Kashu City. Their interests clashed constantly, locking the two in endless rivalry. For the people of Kushin City, it meant nothing but dirty work to keep Xias's favor. Yet Ranson had never wanted any of this. He only wished to leave with the children and live quietly. The man who had served Xias for over a decade cursed him in frustration, realizing the betrayal. Ranson stood in silence, his face grim. The man tried to reason with him, warning that he could not go, because Delkash was a true blood vampire. But Ranson declared that without his siblings, he had no reason to live. The man reminded him of his condition, insisting that he had just returned and could not handle such a fight. But Ranson pressed on, stating that Delkash had the children and there was no time to waste. The man protested again, calling the mission madness, warning that Delkash commanded vampires ranked as high experts and above. Ranson finally addressed him by name, Sir Velson, and gave his command. Velson fell silent, lowering his head in reluctant obedience, and answered with respect, addressing Ranson as His Highness. Ranson then asked him to forget this ever happened and to take care of the others. He promised that he would return victorious and set everything right again. With those words, Ranson departed with his men. Left behind, Velson whispered in defiance to himself. Though he had obeyed with his lips, he vowed in his heart that this was the one order he would refuse to follow. The scene shifted to the past, continental year 1337, March 11th, within the kingdom of Manhwa, where chaos and destruction spread across the land. Flames engulfed everything, reducing the kingdom to ashes. In the heart of the turmoil, the queen of Manhwa, mother of Ranson, resolved to hold off the enemy forces. She handed Ranson over, commanding her loyal knight to take him away. Knight Commander Velson, filled with concern, refused to abandon her, declaring that he would remain until the end and protect her majesty. The queen, with firm resolve, told Sir Velson that his duty was not to guard her, but to protect the bloodline of the kingdom of Manhwa. Velson gritted his teeth in sadness, lowered his head, and submitted to her will. The queen turned to her young son, Ranson, and told the second prince to listen carefully. No matter what happened, he must survive. The duty of the women of Manhwa was to carry on the blood of the royal family into the future. And as a royal, he too must fulfill this responsibility. The young Ranson cried, refusing to leave, saying he did not want to run away alone. With tears in her eyes but a smile on her face, the queen placed a necklace around her son's neck, promising it would help him. She begged him to rebuild the royal family of Manhwa. Velson swore he would give his life to serve, then carried the prince away from the burning capital. Ranson narrated that the sky was ablaze. Unable to die, Velson fled with only the second prince in his arms, having failed to protect the others. The capital was lost in flames. The king and the queen were abandoned and slain. It had been the second prince's 13th birthday, and he had witnessed with his own eyes the death of his parents and siblings. The prince only gazed silently at the burning sky. Thus ended the 500-year history of the knightly kingdom of Manhwa. Everything perished. Velson recounted how they evaded imperial soldiers and reached the prepared escape route. The last surviving young lord and lady of the Marquis family, along with barely 20 knights, crossed the border with them. By continental year 1337, April 1st, they succeeded in crossing into Roxium and stowing away, leaving behind the land of glory and heading toward Robberland. A storm raged outside as the ship's hold creaked. By continental year 1337, August 23rd, they arrived in Robberland, a lawless land filled with criminals and fugitives from across the world. 2 months passed since they reached Kushan City. On the way, many knights had died, leaving only 12 survivors, Velson included. Now, the only surviving heir was the second prince, Ranson, along with the last successors of the noble families. Velson swore to protect them, even if all that lay ahead was disgrace and misery. In the present, at Kashu City within the castle of Count Delkash, the halls were swarming with vampires. Velson cut his way through them, advancing deeper inside while thinking that he was coming to Ranson, and that his young master needed to endure just a little longer. But when he entered, he was shocked to see Delkash slumped lifeless on the throne, a knife stabbed through his chest, neither alive nor dead. Velson wondered where his highness Ranson was. Then he saw the prince lying nearby, gravely injured, whispering that it was all over. Velson was struck with grief, thinking of the royal life of Manhwa and their vow to live in happiness, their pride and hope. Was it truly ending here? He refused to accept it. With tears falling from his eyes, he declared that he must save his highness Ranson. Lifting the injured prince onto his shoulders, he carried him away. 3 years later, at the Ilnian ruins near Kushan City, the weather was calm, and children played as Ranson worked on repairing his home. Velson arrived, and as Ranson turned to greet him, he lost balance and slipped from the ladder. Velson rushed forward, asking if he was fine. Ranson reassured him and asked what the count had said. Velson replied it was the same as always, to wait 1 more month. Ranson smiled, saying that was fine since they could still manage to put food on the table and would ask again next month. Velson warned him again not to do such tasks. Ranson answered that they could not make the kids do it. Velson pointed out that the children had grown up now. Ranson still insisted that even if they had grown, they could not bear such burdens. Velson sighed, accusing him of repeating the same old line of protecting them, calling him Elric. Ranson teased him, asking if he would once again speak of elixir, and Velson admitted he would. The tale of the elixir was then revealed. The potion of life, a miraculous medicine of the ancients, impossible to reproduce with modern magic. One had been found 200 years ago in the Ilbian dungeon. Ranson dismissed it as nothing but an old story, questioning what was wrong with him, and saying it was no use to keep talking about miracles. Velson thought quietly that such a miracle would never happen again. Suddenly, a child called out for them to lower their heads as a wooden sword swung toward them. The children were training, clashing swords. Ranson caught the blade with ease, leaving everyone impressed. He thought to himself that he had just finished repairing the roof, and could not repair it again. He turned to the boy and instructed him never to let go of his sword next time, no matter what. The boy insisted he had been gripping tightly. Ranson explained it was not about how hard the grip was, but how one planted their legs, distributed weight through the whole body, and imagined their opponent clearly in the mind. Ranson then demonstrated, focusing on the scarecrow, taking his stance, and setting his position. But suddenly he remembered his battle 3 years ago against Delcash. Delcash's strike came down, but Ranson dodged. Delcash smirked, telling him that the more one had to protect, the heavier their thoughts weighed them down. With a powerful slash, Delcash attempted to finish him. Ranson blocked, insisting he could not die now because he had too many things to protect. Delcash attacked again, forcing Ranson to struggle yet still dodge. The clash of their swords left both ready to strike again. The memory faded, and back in the present, Ranson's sword split the scarecrow in two. Everyone was shocked, even Ranson himself. Velson exclaimed in disbelief that Ranson had torn through the scarecrow. Embarrassed, Ranson apologized to the boy, saying he had meant only to show him but ended up breaking it. He promised to fix it, but the children were amazed and impressed. Then another child rushed forward, calling out for Teacher Ranson, saying something terrible had happened with Daisy and Seclin. Concerned, Ranson ran to them, sensing an ominous feeling as the air was thick with blood. Far too much for a children's fight. He arrived and saw Ilnian families Daisy and Seclin fighting with swords, both injured. Nearby, Nagi sat with 2 subordinates, watching. He greeted Ranson mockingly, saying it had been a while, Brother Ranson. Ranson glared, demanding to know the meaning of this. Nagi replied that it was simply an interview. When asked, he explained that if the children showed promise, he would take them as his direct bloodkin. Ranson's anger rose as he demanded who Nagi thought he was, daring to mix his filthy blood with theirs. Nagi insisted that even the lowest bloodkin would be better than living under a mutilated cripple. Ranson demanded if Count Xias knew of this. Nagi mocked him, saying that the Count was too busy to care about such things. He admitted he had come on his own, even knowing this was the family's territory. Nagi revealed he had heard a rumor that the great sword master Ranson had lost his arms and legs because of some brats. Ranson glared at him, asking what he meant. Nagi taunted him further, questioning if he could protect anything with that broken body. Ranson commanded him to leave the children and go quietly, or else die by his hand. Nagi laughed, doubting he had the power. Ranson struck with his sword, but Nagi's 2 subordinates blocked. Ranson assessed them, realizing they were merely low-rank experts and no match for him. He declared that a sword master must never be underestimated. Ranson unleashed a powerful strike that sent both men crashing backward. Nagi laughed with a devilish grin, clapping as he praised how Ranson still had it, calling the strike incredible. Ranson responded with scorn, remarking that the young bloods of these days had no fear at all. Nagi, amused, ordered his bodyguards not to be too hard on him, reminding them that he was facing a monster after all. Ranson countered with sharp words, accusing Nagi of still clinging to an inferiority complex with him. Nagi smirked, mocking the very idea of being inferior toward Ranson. Seeing his expression, Daisy and Seclin trembled in fear. At that moment, Nagi drew his sword, and Ranson followed by unsheathing his own. In his mind, Ranson acknowledged that in his current state, he did not stand a chance. He realized he had to finish the battle in a single strike. He advanced swiftly, leaping toward Nagi to deliver his attack. But when his blade clashed with Nagi's, Ranson's sword snapped apart. Nagi mocked him for failing to guard it better, and declared that his core was completely ruined. He reminded him that he had always warned about how superior the Bloodkin were, boasting that he had reached the highest rank. With chilling intent, he wondered aloud what he should do next, and threatened to kill them all one by one. Daisy and Seclin were terrified after hearing those words. Ranson thought to himself that if it was a fight he could not win, then at least he had to protect the kids. He asked Nagi to stop, pointing out that the children were watching. Nagi laughed mockingly, calling it begging. Ranson dropped to his knees, thinking that he knew Nagi's only craving was to defeat him, to bring him down. Nagi declared he could not let him off so lightly, and needed to warm up himself. He began striking continuously, his fists pounding into Ranson until blood poured from his nose and face. Pressing his hand against Ranson's forehead, Nagi continued the assault as Ranson pleaded for him to stop, apologizing in desperation. Finally, Nagi told him not to go soft with him and decided that was enough for the day. Ranson's students rushed toward him in worry, asking if he was okay after losing. Ranson smiled, thinking that he could do anything if it meant keeping them safe. Later, Ranson confronted Daisy and Seklin with stern words. He demanded to know why they would do that, and asked if they truly meant to join the Bloodkin. Seklin lowered his head and apologized, admitting his fault. Ranson then turned to Daisy, asking if she had nothing to say. Daisy snapped, calling it nonsense. When Ranson questioned her, she retorted, asking what was wrong with serving under Xia as a vassal, reminding him that he was a vassal once too. Ranson furiously told her she was clueless, explaining that because of Xia's obsession with becoming a vampire, all their comrades and family had died, and he himself ended up in his broken state. Yet Daisy still wanted to crawl back to him, just to live off blood like cattle. Daisy lashed out in anger, demanding what it had to do with him. She shouted at him, asking if he was her father or something, declaring she would take care of herself and telling him to stop interfering in her life. Tears welled in her eyes as she cried and ran away. Seklin tried to console Ranson, explaining that Daisy did not mean it like that. He acknowledged Ranson's courage, saying he understood how much it must have hurt to kneel down in that moment. He promised to get a potion from Velson right away. Ranson quietly thanked him. Velson soon arrived, visibly tense, calling out to Ranson in concern. Surprised, Ranson asked how Velson knew. Velson explained that a little while ago, Rena had told him Daisy mentioned that Ranson and Nagi would fight and that Ranson would be hurt, so she had come to ask for help. Rena rushed in, flustered, scolding Velson for revealing it. She reminded him that he had promised not to tell them Daisy had said that, warning that Daisy would kill her if she found out. Velson sheepishly admitted she had said that. Ranson burst into laughter after hearing it all, thanking Rena, Seklin, and even Velson for worrying about him. Velson handed him a potion bottle, and Ranson, in his heart, thanked Daisy as well. Later, in solitude, Ranson drank the potion fully. He coughed while whispering to himself that if only his core were intact, someone like Nagi would be nothing before him. He stopped himself, deciding it was fine. Protecting the kids was enough. But deep down, he knew the real problem was that Nagi would return tomorrow. He wondered what he should do. Looking down at his necklace, he made his decision. He would have to use it. The necklace began to shine, and suddenly it transformed into a portal. Ranson reached his hand inside, and thought about selling the treasure of the Van Roa royal family to secure funds for protecting the children. He knew that items like the royal seal would only draw the Empire's pursuit. What he could actually sell was something else. Inside the portal, he discovered a book. He realized that in the end, the only thing left was the Book of Fate. Yet he wondered why such a thing was even considered a royal treasure. The scene shifted to the year 4673 of the Ruse Ras calendar. On March 17th, the sky was cloudy, and inside the secret chapel of the cultists, the walls were covered with strange symbols. Ranson suddenly realized he could read the ancient text. The book began to glow again, and Ranson saw himself running alongside others. Even though just moments ago he had been reading quietly, he wondered why he was suddenly running and questioned if this was an illusion. Voices echoed in the chapel as the cultists shouted that an intruder had entered. They demanded that the elixir be secured first. Ranson's thoughts immediately turned to the elixir. He recognized that the structure around him was exactly like the Ilmian dungeon, yet everything here remained pristine. He remembered that the elixir was said to have been unearthed here in ancient times. The realization struck him. It was indeed the year 4673 of the Ruse Ras calendar, which meant he had been sent back 10,000 years into the past. The cultists rushed to guard the elixir, and when Ranson saw the potion, he confirmed to himself that the elixir was real. The elixir was truly here, and he had indeed come to the past. One man smirked with relief, declaring that the elixir was safe. Ranson's mind burned with ambition. If he could take that elixir, he could regain everything he had lost. He observed 12 people surrounding him, and contemplated whether he should kill them all at once and steal the elixir. But their leader gave new orders, commanding them to pair up in twos and search for the intruder before proceeding with the sacrifice. Kaltik and Chrome were ordered to the East Passage. Sirong and Totten were ordered to the West Passage. Saruas and Ranson were ordered to the North Passage. The thought struck Ranson that they knew his name. He questioned if they recognized him as one of their comrades in the past. He reasoned that only powerful magic interfering with the mind could produce something like this. And he wondered about the true nature of the Book of Fate. Saruas called out, urging Ranson to hurry, and questioned why he was standing there spacing out. Ranson decided for the moment that he would gather information while watching carefully for the right opening. Together, he and Saruas moved toward the North Passage. Suddenly, a blonde girl launched an attack from above. A strange transparent shimmer surrounded her as she struck. Shocked, Ranson wondered about the strange power. He blocked the attack with his blade, but the force pushed him backward. His weapon had been damaged, and he realized its durability was pathetic. This power was bizarre. The blonde girl observed his energy and noticed that it resembled sword chi, but felt entirely different. Ranson also realized that he was not the only one who found it unusual. Something was off, and he considered testing it once more. Then he saw children crying behind the girl, and demanded to know why children were present. The blonde girl accused him of siding with cultists who kidnapped children, condemning him for intending to use them as living sacrifices. Her words made memories of Daisy and Seclin resurface within Ranson's mind. At that moment, other cultists appeared, alarmed and questioning whether Saruas had fallen to the intruder. They began to regroup. In a single instant, Ranson decapitated two of them. The blonde girl was left confused by what she witnessed. Ranson then turned to her and urged her to join forces with him. Ranson pretended to fight alongside the blonde girl, putting on an act convincing enough to draw in the other kidnappers. Believing him to be on their side, they rushed forward to help, but Ranson swiftly cut them down, slaughtering them with his blade. He then acknowledged the blonde girl's performance, noting that her acting skills had made it easier for him to kill them. Hearing this, the girl grew slightly irritated. The situation escalated when the kidnapper's boss appeared. Ranson quickly told the blonde girl to keep assisting him as she had been, admitting that he could not properly read this new opponent. The leader of the kidnappers smirked at Ranson and accused him of betrayal. He spoke of how 5 vengeful spirits had already perished due to bitter betrayal, adding that betrayal itself carried a chaotic nature. With the soul of a noble knight, he claimed, their lord would be even more pleased. Hearing this, the blonde noble knight muttered angrily to herself, regretting not calling for reinforcements before arriving. She could not believe an expert superior had appeared here. Looking at the children, she admitted that she was only an expert intermediate and could not handle such a man alone. She resolved to attack first, instructing Ranson to aim for an opening. The noble knight launched her attack against the leader, but he blocked her strike, causing pain to surge through her hand. She struck again, but the leader dodged and prepared to counter. Before the blow could land, Ranson stepped in, but in doing so, he accidentally struck her necklace, causing it to glow brightly. The leader remarked with a mocking tone that without the necklace, he would have been killed. The leader then unleashed a relentless series of strikes against Ranson. As the attacks rained down, Ranson realized that this man's weapon was no ordinary artifact. Even so, the fact that it blocked so easily was terrifying. He could not predict the path of the leader's sword, and wondered how the noble knight had managed to survive against him for so long. From behind, the noble knight struck at the leader once again, but he still managed to block her attack. Frustrated, she shouted at Ranson, demanding to know what he was doing. She berated him for appearing weak despite his sword key being colored. She questioned what use it was if the sword key was colored, but produced nothing meaningful. The leader then mocked her further, declaring that she was just a half-baked swordswoman who could not even read the heart of the sword. In a shocking moment, Ranson suddenly slashed the noble knight across the stomach, causing her to collapse to the ground. The leader then turned his attention back to Ranson and bid him farewell. Ranson, in shock, questioned in his mind whether he had truly just been called a half-baked swordswoman. He recalled the hardships he had endured under Count Xias, remembering that he had become a sword master, known as a strategic weapon. Grinding his teeth, he resolved to prove otherwise. He thought to himself that if they believed he was half-baked, then they should try to withstand what he was about to unleash. He advanced forward, unleashing his aura thread technique. The leader, suddenly panicked, questioned how such a thing was possible, and admitted that the power before him was on an entirely different level than before. Ranson struck, his overwhelming strength leaving the man in shock. He thought again of how he had been mocked as a half-baked swordsman who could not even read the heart of the sword. And with one decisive strike, Ranson cut the leader's throat and killed him. Blood poured from Ranson's mouth, and his strength faltered. He dropped to the ground, sitting heavily. From the leader's body, he seized an elixir and quickly drank it. The noble knight, weakened, questioned him about what he was doing. The scene then shifted elsewhere, where Daisy was searching for her brother. She reflected that she needed to apologize to him, even if it was late. She noted that he had not been here before and wondered if he might have returned by now. When she opened the door to Ranson's room, she froze in shock. Her eyes widened as she saw her brother lying collapsed on the floor. Daisy and Velson carefully laid Ranson on the bed, covering him gently with a blanket. Daisy then told Velson that she would stay awake by her brother's side throughout the night. Velson agreed, telling her to call him when Ranson woke up. After that, Velson left the room. Daisy looked down at Ranson with sadness in her heart. She thought of how he was once the strongest among them. Yet because of their failures he suffered again and again. Each time this happened, she felt so ashamed that she wished she could die. At that moment, Ranson opened his eyes. He muttered that he had only drunk half of the elixir. He then wondered to himself if he had returned to the present, or if it was just a dream. Seeing him awake, Daisy's tension grew. She rushed to him in shock, realizing he was conscious. She noticed his body covered in blood, and asked frantically why he had disappeared and what had happened to him. Ranson simply stared at her. Daisy became confused and asked why he was staring at her like that. He replied by asking if she had just called him brother. Daisy flushed with embarrassment and anger, denying it, but her red eyes betrayed the truth. Ranson teased her, pointing out that she had cried so much that her eyes were swollen. He asked if she had really been that worried about her brother. Daisy admitted that she had indeed been worried. She declared that she could not help it, because of course she cared about him. Ranson thanked her warmly, smiling as he thought about how much he had enjoyed teasing Daisy like that. Suddenly, a sharp pain struck his head. Daisy grew tense once more, but then something remarkable happened. Positive aura surged from Ranson's body, and his pain disappeared. He realized that he was not sick. It had not been a dream. It had been real. He thought back and admitted that drinking only a sip should not have been enough, but somehow it had been. Daisy looked at him in shock, staring at his changing body. She asked about what was happening to him. His metallic hands and legs that had once been bound in iron form began to shift. They reverted to their natural state, becoming whole human limbs again. Slowly, he stood up and began to walk. Daisy's eyes widened as she gasped in disbelief. She remembered saying that his limbs would grow back, and now her words had come true. She kept staring, overwhelmed, repeating that she could not believe it. She pulled on his arms with excitement, exclaiming that he truly had arms and legs again. In her excitement, she pulled too hard, and Ranson scolded her lightly, warning her not to tug so much or they might fall off. Then his body gave way, and he fainted once more. After some time, he regained consciousness again. This time, Daisy, Seclin, Velson, Mina, and others were gathered around him, all of them shocked beyond belief. Velson, overcome with emotion, wept tears of joy. He cried out in amazement at the miracle before him, asking what on earth had happened to Ranson. Ranson calmly explained that he had drunk the elixir. Velson froze in shock, realizing what he had just said. He asked again, stunned, if Ranson had really drunk something worth more than 50,000 Dauron in a single sip. Ranson nodded, then paused. He said there was something important he wanted to check before anything else. He stepped down from the bed and began to walk. Velson followed closely, asking if Ranson could really move like this without any problem. Ranson admitted that he would need rehabilitation, but otherwise he felt fine. More importantly, he requested that Velson come with him. Velson, still bewildered, agreed. Together they walked to the place where Ranson had once discovered the elixir. Ranson thought to himself that the elixir had definitely been placed there. Velson grew uneasy, asking what was going on and why Ranson had brought him here of all places. Ranson replied that this was exactly what he wanted to check. He admitted that even he could not fully believe what was happening. Ranson's thoughts grew sharper. He noticed that the rear side of the area was heavily guarded, which could only mean that it was the key to unlocking a hidden space. At that moment, Ranson uncovered a key. With it, He created a brilliant magic circle that shone with radiant light. Suddenly, treasures appeared before them. Gold alone worth 5,000 Dalron glittered in piles. Ancient relics, ancient swords, ancient armor, and even magical tools filled the hidden chamber. Velson stood stunned, asking how such a thing was possible. First, Ranson's limbs had suddenly regenerated, and now this astonishing trove was revealed. He admitted he could hardly believe it himself, then confessed something more. He had been to this very place 10,000 years ago. Ranson was shocked by this revelation, but in his heart he confirmed the truth. He realized that these relics were not one-time use items. If he could return to the past again and again, then he could achieve anything. He told Velson that there was something they must do first. Far away, Nagi was relaxing in his bed, surrounded by countless dead bodies lying across his room. He smiled coldly to himself, savoring the feeling of what it meant to truly live. He wondered with excitement what new joys the day might bring. Rising from his bed, he decided to go and take a look at Ranson, who had become a has-been in his eyes. But then he froze. He noticed something strange. He saw Ranson approaching, and to his shock, Ranson's arms and legs had been restored. Nagi quickly ordered his knights to spread the news. He told them to go at once and inform the Lord that Ranson had restored his core. He commanded them to split up, run fast, and deliver the message. Yet before the orders could fully take effect, Ranson struck with his blade. His attack was aimed at Nagi, but Nagi's bodyguards rushed in to protect their master. The strike landed on the guards instead, sending them crashing to the ground. Ranson displayed such exceptional swordsmanship that even Nagi and his two bodyguards were defeated. Nagi became extremely startled to see Ranson's skill and loss of his two bodyguards. He asked, astonished, how Ranson had become so capable. But Ranson gave no answer and only watched. Ranson gripped his sword tightly and stepped forward to attack Nagi. Nagi drew his sword as well and blocked Ranson's strike. Nagi mocked Ranson, noting that Ranson faced him not with an aura blade, but with aura threads, and observing that Ranson's core had not fully recovered yet. Ranson answered with a curt dismissal of that observation, and Nagi was taken aback by the reply. Ranson then used a different technique and launched another attack. Nagi remained confident and prepared to block the attack with his sword, thinking that he was not the same man as 3 years ago and declaring himself a direct bloodkin under the count. A noble class with a superior body, a regeneration ability that refused death, and a vampire aura combined to make him formidable even against a sword master. Red aura began to emanate around Nagi's body and sword. Ranson changed the direction of his attack, which confused Nagi. At that moment, Ranson cut Nagi's neck on the spot and separated his head from his body. Nagi's head fell to the ground. Ranson stared at the fallen head in anger and thought that his core had recovered, but the scattered aura still needed gathering. The next scene took place in the morning. Daisy was at home questioning her brother Ranson about whether he had truly drunk the elixir in the past. Ranson confirmed that he had, explaining that he had gone to the past through a treasure of the Van Roa royal family. Uncle Velson, sitting with them, asked whether that meant Ranson could go back to the past again. Ranson replied that he did not know, and that since then the artifact had shown no reaction, and he still did not understand how the book had allowed him to travel to the past. A girl present was introduced as the heir of the Ilnian family and successor of Marquis Milan, named Saya Milan. Saya listened to the conversation and suggested that if the object was an artifact made during the magic era, then going back might be possible. Ranson pondered Saya's words and wondered whether divine power could really dwell in such a small object, even if it was ancient technology. Daisy interjected, pointing out that the elixir was discovered 200 years ago and noting that if Ranson had drunk it 10,000 years ago, it could not have been discovered 200 years ago. Ranson agreed with Daisy and became excited after her remark. Daisy grew confused at his excitement. Ranson then revealed that he had only drunk half of the elixir before returning. He asked Uncle Velson whether there had been talk that the elixir found 200 years ago was only half. Uncle Velson replied that he had not heard exactly how much of it was found. Ranson concluded that if that was the case, it was impossible to know for certain. Uncle Velson proposed that whether the original discovery had been a complete elixir, or whether history had changed because Ranson drank it and only half was discovered, there was no way to know. Saya asserted that what was certain was that if it was possible to go back, the entire world could change depending on what Ranson did there. Saya then asked Ranson what he would want to accomplish if he could change the past. Ranson reflected on what he wanted to accomplish. Revenge for losing his family overnight, his duty as the last surviving royal of Manhwa, and the restoration of the kingdom of Manhwa. First and foremost, Ranson decided that Count Xias must die. Ranson explained that he had believed becoming a vassal of Kushan City's lord would guarantee his family's safety, and he regretted not realizing sooner that happiness borrowed from others' hands could never be secure. These thoughts stirred resolve in Ranson. Seiya warned that Count Xias was strong, that he had already been a sword master, and that he had now taken Delkash's true blood, so his strength could be unknown. Ranson asserted that this was not optional, and that if someone as crazed as Xias learned he had recovered, the reaction would be dire. Ranson declared that it was a fight they could not avoid. He noted that the tax report they had to offer Count Xias was due in 3 weeks, and that they needed to settle matters before then. The scene shifted to Ranson's training place, where he held his sword and thought about the swordsman once wielded by the cult leader 10,000 years ago. He recalled that persistent, unyielding swordsmanship with a sharp aura. The cult leader's earlier taunt returned to Ranson's mind, telling him that even if his sword energy shone in color, he was still a half-baked swordsman who could not read the heart of the sword. Ranson tried to calm himself and resolved to become like the blade, to understand it and become the sword itself. He closed his eyes and meditated deeply. After long focus, aura began to appear around his sword, and Ranson felt happy, thinking that this definitely was not an error. Daisy arrived, running in distress, and told Ranson that trouble had arisen. Daisy began to speak about Count Xias, though that part of the conversation was not shown. The narrative then shifted to Count Xias, who sat upon his throne and smiled as he announced that he had waited long enough for the nobles of the Manhwa kingdom. He gave a creepy smile, and declared that finally it was time to use them as offerings. Ranson thought to himself that only 3 weeks remained until the tax report, and suddenly the Count had invited them. Uncle Velson, filled with tension, asked Seiya if it could be that Krancis had noticed Ranson had recovered and had killed Nagi. Seiya replied that it was impossible, because even if the Count knew Nagi was dead, he would believe it was the work of rebels. She continued, explaining that the real problem was the sudden invitation, which disrupted their plan to assassinate the Count. Their only chance had been to strike when Count Xias performed his ritual. The mention of the ritual left Ranson confused, and Seiya explained further. She told him that ever since her brother had ended up in his condition, the Count left his manor once a month to conduct a ritual alone. Daisy added that she had seen Xias's men kidnapping children. Seiya went on to explain that villages unable to pay taxes were massacred, and all the corpses and children were used as sacrifices for the ritual. Hearing this, Ranson questioned in shock that the Count would prepare corpses and living sacrifices just to grovel before some being he could not even comprehend. Seiya told him to forget the Xias he once knew. Ranson thought to himself that much had changed while Xias stayed home after his injuries. He then asked Seiya how she knew all this. Seiya revealed that she had her own information network. Ranson was deeply shocked and astonished, asked her how she could have gone alone into such a dangerous city. Seiya ignored his concern and declared that their whole plan was ruined. Ranson, still in disbelief, repeated his worry, asking if it was not too dangerous for her to roam the city alone. Uncle Velson answered that Seiya was 20 and an adult. Daisy then turned to her brother and asked if he really thought he could face Xias. Ranson uncovered a sword and answered firmly that he had to. He placed the sword on the table before him and declared that with this weapon, there was a chance. Uncle Velson, seeing the sword, grew nervous and identified it as the king's sword, forged from silver steel that had fallen from the heavens and refined by Aurora. Ranson gripped the sword and stated that corrupt creatures such as vampires could not withstand the blade. Seiya accepted this, saying she would trust him, and added that if it did not work, then dying together was fine. Ranson grew irritated and was about to reply when Seiya cut him off, saying she was only joking. She then concluded that they would need to find another way to kill Count Xias, dangerous as it was, because it was their only option. The story shifted to Ruera village, where children played happily and gathered mushrooms. One child excitedly showed another a large mushroom, while the second claimed his was bigger. The first suggested they measure them at home to see who was right. As they headed home, the mushroom fell from the child's hand. Suddenly, fire spread through the houses of the village. The children grew terrified and wondered what had happened. Soldiers appeared, slaughtering the villagers and loading corpses into a van. The soldiers noticed the children and ordered their deaths. The frightened children tried to escape, but an arrow struck, grazing a child's cheek and shooting directly into the eyes of two soldiers. The children panicked, but then a man appeared, asking if they were all right. Crying, the children asked who he was. The man introduced himself as Rivera Pietrolanda. The children were confused by the name, then realized he was a baron. Rivera lifted the children into his arms and told them they would talk more later. But first they needed to get out of the village. He carried all 4 children at once, and they, still in shock, begged that they could not leave without their families. Rivera grew furious within, thinking to himself that killing a few subordinates would not stop the horror, and that Count Xias had truly fallen beyond redemption. The scene cut to nightfall at the Count's palace. The corpses from the massacre were brought there. The butler reported to Count Xias that there were a total of 116 corpses, more than the quota for the day. Xias looked over the bodies and laughed in a chilling manner. He told the butler he would handle the rest and ordered him to leave. The butler bowed, uncovered the corpses loaded in a van, and departed. Xias inhaled the smell of blood and flesh and, smiling, remarked that tomorrow was the day Ranson and his people would enter the palace, and that at last the moment he had been waiting for was coming. As he approached another van, he noticed a corpse holding a sword. Curious, he uncovered it. Suddenly, the corpse moved, and the sword was drawn, slashing toward him. Xias was shocked. The strike came from Ranson himself. A flashback revealed Sea's plan. She had explained that according to intel, the bodies from Ruera village would be transported on a cart. She instructed Ranson to pretend to be one of the corpses and sneak inside. In this way, he would be delivered straight to the Count. She warned him to conceal his mana until the right moment, and when the Count lowered his guard, that would be his chance. Back in the present, Ranson launched his attack against Count Xias. The Count blocked it with his hand and recognized him, asking why he had come without notice. Ranson's anger burned, and he thought to himself that he knew it would not be easy. Ranson and Count Xias distanced themselves from each other. Count Xias observed Ranson's healed body and recognized that he must have found some sort of elixir. He congratulated him, but in Ranson's mind, the thought was clear. This scheming would end here, and the only way forward was to fight and win. Count Xias drew his sword and challenged Ranson, demanding to see his despair. A red aura began to radiate from his blade. Ranson steadied himself and focused, and soon a blue aura surged from his own sword. He felt the energy and declared within himself that he had read the heart of the sword. He rushed forward to attack, but Count Xias blocked the strike with ease and countered, forcing Ranson to fall back. Xias launched another powerful attack, forcing Ranson to leap aside. The blow struck the floor, shattering it into pieces. Without pause, Xias pressed forward with more strikes. Ranson began to shape his own attack form, surprising Xias. Blue aura burst violently from his sword as he charged directly at his opponent. Xias reinforced his neck with aura and narrowly dodged, the strike tearing the ground apart behind him. Impressed, he admitted that if his aura had been weaker, his neck would have been cut, and he acknowledged that Ranson truly lived up to someone from the kingdom of Manhwa. Ranson demanded to know how Xias knew about Manhwa. Xias smirked and revealed his guess. Ranson must be the missing second prince whose body was never found. Seeing him alive was precious indeed, and offering his soul could fulfill Xias's wish. Ranson gave no reply, instead preparing another form of attack. He struck once more at Xias's neck, but the aura shield held firm. Xias told him it was useless, that no matter how many times he tried, his sword could not pierce the aura. Ranson refused to retreat. He pushed harder against his blade, while Xias mocked him again, insisting his sword could never cut through. Rage flared within Ranson, and blue aura even blazed from his eyes. He unleashed a furious strike that devastated the battlefield around them. At the same time, in a nearby restaurant, several men were gathered at a table eating and drinking. One of them asked their captain why he had called everyone together, wondering if trouble was being planned. Their captain, Rivera, explained that he had received intelligence about something unusual. When pressed for details, he and the others suddenly turned to look in one direction, shocked by what they saw. The fight between Ranson and Count Xias was visible even from there. The land around them left half destroyed as their battle raged. Rivera's men questioned if this was the event their captain had warned about and wondered who could dare attempt such a thing. One man peered through a magnifying glass. Then Rivera himself asked for it and looked more closely. Another man recognized Ranson from a distance, and Rivera, startled, realized his body had indeed recovered. A flashback followed, showing Seiya in a meeting with Rivera. She told him this was the last chance that would never come again, urging him to decide carefully whether to seize the opportunity or regret it for life. Hearing this, Rivera had been anxious, questioning whether she truly believed the Count could be killed. In his mind, he reflected that even as rebels, saving a few children was all they could manage. Even if they joined forces, it would only lead to meaningless deaths. Back in the present, one of his men grew uneasy and asked if they were only going to watch, insisting they should step in. Rivera, with a heavy and hopeless expression, apologized. Meanwhile, the fight continued without pause. Neither Ranson nor Count Kayas was willing to accept defeat. Ranson pressed forward with repeated strikes to Kayas's neck, each time blocked by aura. In his mind, he told himself again and again, one more time. Kayas continued to defend, his aura shielding his neck from every attempt. Then Ranson let out a furious scream, throwing all his strength into a final strike. His roar was so intense it confused Kayas for a moment, and his aura weakened slightly. That small lapse was enough for Ranson to slice through and leave a line across Kayas's neck. Blood spilled, and the Count, enraged, shouted at him. Seeing his effort succeed, Ranson smiled with satisfaction. The ruined mansion came into view, where Count Kayas touched the wound on his neck and admitted that Ranson's swordsmanship was truly remarkable. Ranson gave no reply. Instead, the Count revealed his cruelty, having killed the villagers and transferred their corpses into vampires. Controlling them, he declared that the sword might eventually break through, but only if it could keep reaching him. With that, he ordered his vampire army to attack. Ranson fought back, cutting through the vampires with his blade, but frustration grew within him. He thought about how he had hidden among corpses just to face Kayas one-on-one. Yet the endless swarm of vampires was wearing him down. If things continued this way, he would tire out before even cutting down Kayas. A vampire suddenly attacked, and Ranson barely managed to dodge. He countered with a strike to the creature's chest, and pressed himself to deal with them quickly. Another vampire lunged from behind, catching him off guard. Before he could react, an arrow shot through the air at light speed and pierced the vampire's forehead, dropping it instantly. Ranson was shocked. The silver arrow drew the attention of the remaining vampires, who were equally startled, realizing aura had been imbued into the arrows. They demanded to know who had done it. Turning back, Ranson saw Rivera standing there with bow in hand. At that moment, another figure appeared beside Rivera, Ranson's brother, Jaltrin. The sight left Ranson even more stunned. Soon after, Seiya, Daisy, and Seklin also arrived, surprising him further. Rivera's men charged into battle against the vampires, shouting their rage and thirst for revenge. Rivera himself added aura to his arrows and fired, while Seiya, Daisy, and Ranson's other brothers joined the fight. Ranson, overwhelmed, cried out in worry, asking why they had come when they could be hurt. Daisy rebuked him, reminding him that he should not try to do everything alone. They had all grown up, and this was something they needed to face together. Jaltrin agreed, and told his brother to focus only on the Count. Hearing this, Ranson was moved. He realized it was no longer time to treat them like children. Smiling, he tightened his grip on his sword and fixed his gaze on Kayas. Count Kayas readied himself to block. Blue aura spread across Ranson's entire body, flowing down to his legs. He raised his sword and charged with determination, intent on dealing with the enemy he needed to defeat. Kayas responded with a twisted smile, enhancing the muscles of his arm with power. Stretching his arm to an unnatural length, he tried to strike Ranson from a distance, even threatening to tear off his arm. In response, Ranson pulled off the necklace from his neck. It projected a shield before him, blocking the attack. The force caused an explosion, burning half of Kayas' arm. Shocked, the Count demanded to know what it was. Ranson revealed it as a guardian necklace, and threw the broken remains aside once the shield faded. He reflected that it was the necklace he had found in the ruins. A shame it had broken, but its use was done. The Count's fury grew as he looked at his half-burned arm. Ranson recognized the moment of weakness. After every all-out attack, there was always a gap. Now was the time for the secret technique he had not yet revealed. His sword blazed with powerful aura, as he declared within himself that the heart of the sword and his own heart had become one. He unleashed an attack that created a raging tornado. Count Kayas roared with rage, refusing to be defeated, and launched his own deadly strike. The two forces clashed violently, but Ranson's tornado proved stronger. tearing apart the Count's attack and leaving him stunned. Exhausted from constant strikes, Kayas's aura around his neck weakened in the brief gap between attacks. That was the chance Ranson had been waiting for. He surged forward, closing the distance, and struck with his sword. This time, the Count could neither defend nor dodge. The blade cut clean through, severing his head from his body. The mansion around them crumbled further, falling deeper into destruction as the Count was finally defeated.